Welcome to the Unofficial Steelers Podcast, the podcast so unofficial it doesn't have a home. Here's your host, from In Hindsight, Nathan Heitz. From Steelers Nation Australia, Mark Davison. And from State of the Steelers, Daniel J. Here we go.
What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to the Unofficial Steelers Podcast. I'm Daniel, alongside with me as always, Nathan Heitz. How's it going, my man? How you doing?
We're doing all right. Not too bad. A little bit of a busy day today. But this time frame worked out. So appreciate everybody making the show that's here. Anybody tuning in after, thank you guys for tuning in. Good to see everybody in the chat. Little bit of a newsworthy show today, guys.
100%. And let's start off with the most recent of news. The Pittsburgh Steelers have signed a offensive coordinator. They're bringing in Arthur Smith, formerly head coach of the Atlanta Falcons for the last couple of years. Prior to that, he was the offensive coordinator for the Tennessee Titans. In fact, he'd been a coach for Tennessee for some time. I'm not sure if you know this also, but his father is like the founder of FedEx. So he comes from
I know that.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I think that's how he got his coaching career started, because I think in the NFL he started off in some form or fashion with the Washington, then called Redskins.
Right.
He was affiliated with them while his father was a minority owner, and so that's kind of how he got into the league. But he's been around for a little bit. When you first heard the news, what was your knee-jerk reaction?
My knee-jerk reaction to it right away was I didn't really have a reaction either way. It was more so like, okay, I'm not really surprised. I'm not really surprised they went this route, but I just wondered like why they only interviewed like 3 guys, didn't they? They didn't really interview too many people.
Yeah, there was rumors and stuff, but I think it was only about 3, maybe 4, but
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah. I wasn't really too surprised. I've seen reactions from everybody, from hating it to loving it to being in between. So probably no matter who they were going to hire at OC, people were going to like it or not. I mean, it's just the nature of it. But I think just where I stand right now with it, before you kind of give your opinion on it, I'm indifferent. I'm not going to write him off or anything. He's obviously had his bad misfortunes with Atlanta. He did some good things in Tennessee. It's 2 different things, calling an offense versus being a head coach. So there's some different forces there. I think there's some good things to look at. There's some concern. But from an overall standpoint, you got to let it play out, man. You got to let it play out. So it's okay for now.
I agree. For me, I'm not looking at this as the situation where, we're going to be looking at Ritter and what he did with the Atlanta Falcons in the last couple of years. I don't think we're going to be looking
that
at
was
that.
terrible. Yeah, that was terrible.
Yeah. I think that his offense there struggled with bad quarterback play, which was kind of the concern for me when he got hired, and still is to a certain extent. I was very surprised when he ended up getting hired. I saw the Steelers were interested in him. I saw that they interviewed him, and I thought that, maybe they're going to bring him in as a, running backs coach or a running game coordinator or something to that effect, because his background is running backs and tight ends. It's not really quarterbacks. He had Ryan Tannehill at the height of his career, was in Tennessee with Ryan Tannehill as his quarterback, who was already a guy that had been in the league for some time. And although he wasn't a guy that had done great things prior to being in Tennessee, and during his time with Ryan Tannehill, that is, his time with Arthur Smith, that was his best time of his career. So I understand those 2 aspects of it, but he didn't develop him.
Right.
And based on what Tomlin said, what Coach Rooney said, I thought that we were going to get somebody who worked with quarterbacks. So I was just a little bit confused. what do you think about how he's going to be able to how do you think he can develop Kenny Pickett if that's still in the game plan?
Right. Real quick, Mark's question: what do you all think about bringing in Mayfield? I think a lot of people would be okay with it. It's just he's probably going to get a good contract extension with Tampa Bay. He's been bouncing around too. I think too, probably with what they're doing with Arthur Smith, if they would bring in anybody, they'd probably want it to kind of match what he does or what he likes. I don't know if Baker fits that mold necessarily. Um, but for like your question in terms of how confident I am, do I think that he could work with Kenny? That's kind of the question, right?
Yeah.
Uh, I don't know. I don't say I would have a high level of confidence. I know people will point to Ryan, but Ryan was in the league though for quite a little while before he went to the Titans. He still wasn't living up to that first round draft pick with the Dolphins.
Mm-hmm.
And when he went to the Titans for at least 2 years, he had a little bit of a new lease on his career. I wouldn't be surprised if they went in a direction of whatever they want to do at quarterback coach or somebody that works with the I know they title it pass game coordinator. I wouldn't be surprised if they look in a different direction there, maybe where that position's a little more hands-on with the quarterback, somebody that's maybe mastered that role a little bit. I know that Gerard Johnson they looked at from the Texans who was similar in that type of role. He decided to stick there. So I'm not gonna say I'm like that confident Arthur Smith's going to bring out trait A, B, and C from Kenny. Now maybe his offense and the way he is a coach might help Pickett in that type of way of where uh versus what Matt Canada wanted to do, and that was just kind of a really we all know how much of a mess it was. So maybe with a new because I do think Arthur Smith will bring a new lease on their offense, and they're not going to do the jet sweep motion type stuff that Matt Canada was so heavily in. But I'm not going to say that it's going to just because that he got some good production out of Ryan Tannehill. I don't think that that's a square foot in the stone. People should be confident that Kenny Pickett's going to throw 33 touchdowns like Ryan Tannehill did. Right? I don't think that's really
Yeah.
a fair assessment, or I don't think anybody should have that expectation. It might give him a little bit of if they stick with him as their quarterback, it might give him maybe a little bit of a fresh start in a way. Sometimes guys need that, but and especially with kind of the dark cloud that Matt Canada brought. But I'm just not at that point of being confident, Daniel. I'm not. I
Yeah.
have my reservations. I have my concerns. I think that's justified, but I'm okay with this. Like I said, I'm indifferent about the hire itself. No matter who the quarterback is, I would feel indifferent just because we've seen both sides to Arthur Smith. It's a different ball game with him as a head coach than just being a play caller and working with an offense. In terms of responsibility and everything else, and focusing just more on working with said group is a lot different than covering all bases as a head coach. So I think there's some good things to be excited about with him there. I think there should be some caution there. Um, but just terms of like not to keep going on about this question, but my expectations aren't any different in terms of Kenny and what he's ultimately going to become. I think if Kenny showed us some really promising things last year, even in the midst of a struggle offensively and poor coaching, whatever you want to name it, I think I would feel a little different, but he didn't
Mhm.
show really many of us a lot of promise about really anything,
Yeah.
even in the midst of those struggles. I know a lot of people want to see him with a new guy. I understand that viewpoint. My main thing with that is just that even as bad as a situation that the offense was in throughout the year, there just still wasn't much there for you to grasp and hold on to and be confident about when it came to his
Mhm.
quarterback play. And that was my whole expectation going in the year. It's not, okay, I'm expecting Kenny to be a Pro Bowl quarterback. It's just I want to see him give me A, B, and C, and then you can have D, E, F, and G as the things that he needs to get better at. And maybe if you bring in some new coaching, some of that can unlock more. But I didn't see A, B, and C, Daniel,
Right.
if that
No,
makes sense.
I agree with you too. I agree with what you're saying. With me, when I saw that this hiring and what it meant with Kenny Pickett in the quarterback position was that the Steelers, and it also kind of goes with, let me reframe a little bit. It also kind of goes with what Art Rooney was saying, as far as what the Steelers were able to do with good quarterback play is they've moved on from developing, not necessarily developing Kenny Pickett. I don't think that's the word I'm looking for, but they've moved on, um, they want somebody who can do the job already.
You're right.
Now, if they need to develop somebody like Kenny Pickett, that can be done in the background. As him as QB2, probably not getting a 5th-year option. Let's just be real. And I think what that means is that they're going to want somebody maybe a little bit more proven out. I think that there's 2 quarterbacks in free agency that the Steelers are going to target here. One of them is going to be Mason Rudolph, who's a free agent from the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Right.
And with Arthur Smith, given the fact that, I think they're going to want somebody who's going to lead this team, somebody who knows the offense.
Yeah.
I think Ryan Tannehill ends up becoming a big piece.
I know a lot of people have been throwing that out there.
Yeah. I mean, I think it makes sense from a certain angle. Like, he knows the offense. He was when he was most successful, it was while he was under Arthur Smith.
Yeah.
And, when it comes to Kenny Pickett, though, to kind of go back, what Arthur Smith does is a lot of like play action pass, which was a lot of things that we didn't see from Kenny Pickett. Now, I don't know if that was because it was Canada. I doubt it. I think it was his processing. There was a statement that Art Rooney had mentioned during his interviews that he, when it came to like what they liked about Kenny Pickett, they talked about, the intangibles, right? The those things that, the clutch, the whole 9 yards, right? Yeah. But he made one specific statement saying that outside of the huddle, once they break the huddle, reading defenses faster and better. If you're doing a play action pass, you're looking opposite from the field, and then you got to turn back around and then read the defense even faster. Your post snap read. So if he's struggling with those reads, play action pass aren't going to be an option for him.
Right.
So that tells me that, this offseason is going to be huge for Kenny Pickett. He's going to have to get with somebody, and he's going to have to come in, with that going into training camp. And if he doesn't, I think he's going to end up QB2 on this team fairly quickly.
Yeah, I don't think anybody should just be 100% set in stone that he's going to win the starting job. I mean, he really could come out. You never know. Like, he really could come out and he's just uncomfortable in this new offense they're trying to do. It's not working out in the preseason. Like, you can see it for yourself. There's miscommunication. A lot of things are off. Like, I don't think Kenny's the smartest quarterback either. Daniel's kind of talked about things like that in terms of his football IQ, stuff like that. Being over 25 starts, and you're not saying that he needs to have the mind of one of these other guys out there, but when you're kind of rinse and repeating the same struggles in terms of what defense they're putting out, what defense they're showing you, it's that's something that needs to be caught up onto a lot quicker. We all know that. But yeah, I don't think anybody should just say, all right, well, Kenny's QB1 and he's going to finally have a new OC and he can bring all this stuff out of that. No, like, you should not even jump to that conclusion. It's definitely possible that there's some struggle there. It's definitely possible that he doesn't get his feet wet that very good under Arthur Smith. And like what Daniel said, Arthur Smith could be there, and the Steelers too be looking at just you have another option. What's going to be the other quarterback in the room that can work with this new offensive coordinator and what they want to do offensively. So it's definitely a huge offseason for him. That this really could be his last shot ultimately at his future here. On my last episode, my last live, I just went a little in depth on some of my concerns and what would kind of excite me in terms of the direction they went with the quarterback room. But Ryan Tannehill is a name that's been thrown out there. Ryan Tannehill is really what I want to say about him is
let it out.
Let's say hypothetically they bring him in, Daniel. Okay, let's say we're not even going to talk about Mason Rudolph or anything like that. Let's just say they bring him in. I'm gonna be honest with you guys. If Ryan Tannehill comes in and KP and him are the 1 and the 2 battling out, I don't really feel that excited. I really don't.
Yeah.
I'm really not too excited, man. I'm really not. I think Tannehill, he still has a little juice left in his career as a number 2 guy. Um, he had a couple good years there with Tennessee leading, helping him get to the playoffs. But I mean, do you really want that in this current state of the AFC? Ryan Tannehill as your every week guy? I personally don't. Like I don't really feel I don't really feel good about that. That's just my opinion. Not saying that it's a bad or a good idea to bring him in, but if he's going to be the guy week 1, I don't really feel too good. I'm just going to be honest about it.
Yeah, I'm kind of on your side of the fence there. I wouldn't be
Yeah.
so, confident going
Yeah.
in there with Ryan Tannehill as the
I
guy
wouldn't.
there. You
Yeah.
know, I think when it comes to Ryan Tannehill and Arthur Smith, it should be a testament to Arthur Smith that he was able to elevate
Yeah.
Ryan Tannehill to that
Yeah.
level, not
Yeah.
necessarily
Tannehill was
try to
really he
replicate
he
that.
was honestly really just kinda below average for the most part with Miami before he went to the Titans. He got a
Yeah,
couple years of being rejuvenated, um, and he kinda had a little bit of a career career boost a little bit for a couple years, but after that, I mean, there's kind of a reason why, like, they've gone a different direction at quarterback. Like, Ryan Tannehill is just not, he's older a little bit. His abilities have gone down more. He's not really they didn't really view him as their guy going forward, and they've kind of really gotten out, I think, everything out of him they could as a starter. I think if
yeah,
he's someone that you need him in a pinch for a game or 2, okay, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you feel confident in him being the starter with the current state of the AFC in a 17-game season, I don't really see it. I'm not.
yeah.
I'm not confident.
I wouldn't be either. And like I said, I think that that's something, you're going to try to replicate somebody else than Ryan Tannehill because he's not the same guy that he was in 2019. Wasn't it like
Yeah.
2019, 2018, somewhere around there? So,
Yeah.
it's been a few years now. And as we've seen, by the time you don't typically get stronger, you don't typically get, your processing gets better. Once you get up there in age, typically the game
Right.
starts to get faster again,
Right.
and it goes downhill. And I think that moving into a different direction is probably more important. But with this move with Arthur Smith, what it also tells me is that the Pittsburgh Steelers don't plan on um, probably getting a quarterback early in the draft. I don't see Arthur Smith and a brand new QB, you
Yeah.
know, being a part of the same formula right now. I mean, maybe. I mean, you got to start off somewhere, right? But
Right.
just given his history of tight ends, running backs, and then tight ends again, and then looking at his style of offense that he has put forth. I mean, even in Atlanta, he had Bijan Robinson, Algier.
Yeah.
That was their strength, was the running game. It was never to highlight the quarterback position.
Mhm.
I believe they drafted Desmond Ritter in the third. So, he's had his problems also assessing and acquiring quarterbacks.
Right.
What do you think that drafting a quarterback is now out of the picture?
It could be in the early rounds. I definitely think if they're just gonna roll the dice, let's say ultimately they're just gonna run it back primarily. I definitely see them taking a quarterback, like, maybe somewhere in the middle of the draft, just to kinda have that if there's somebody there that they like certain things about, a guy that can be there to be underneath the other 2. I think that's possible. But in terms of it being like a high like, early pick, like, yeah, probably not. And they're not really in that position either. Hold on, guys. There
Sorry
you
about
go.
that. Yeah, you're
Uh,
absolutely right.
keep talking. My thing's just, lagging out on me for a second. I'll rejoin in about 5 seconds.
No problem. No, I agree with him. I think that not in the early rounds. Maybe perhaps he gets somebody later on. I know that we're going to hear that the quarterbacks coach is who develops the quarterback, and and would have a big say in those things. But when it comes down to assessing and acquiring those quarterbacks, the offensive coordinator, plays a huge role in it. And it's you don't see the quarterbacks coach often, when it comes to like pro days and things like that. When it comes to players that they truly want, you usually
Right.
typically see the general manager, the head coach,
There
and
we go.
the offensive coordinator. Those are the trio. And so I think that means in this situation here, it's probably not on the highest part of the draft board, so to speak.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I think maybe if the Steelers were in a middle part of position or something like that to, I don't know, let's say like picks, maybe like 12 to 15, they're probably in a better spot if there's somebody that starts to drop a little bit, maybe to make a move there. But it's
Yeah.
hard being at pick 20 to fire your way all the way up to the draft board unless there's really a name that just happens to fall for whatever reason. So, um, yeah, I think that's probably primarily unrealistic, an early pick at quarterback, but they could go maybe like the 4th round or 5th round or something.
Yeah. The one thing I think that maybe excites me a little bit about Arthur Smith is his connection to Mike Munchak.
Yeah.
And, is there a possibility he's going to, get his own staff? What do you think about that? That if they bring in an OC, Arthur Smith, he's a guy that's been a former head coach. He's been a successful offensive coordinator, and they're not letting him pick, his running back coach, his quarterback coach, things like that. Do you think that says anything?
Um, Not necessarily. We know how like kind of I don't want to necessarily say full on control, but we know that I mean, Mike Tomlin's got a good bit of control on stuff. If he didn't, like, he's been the coach, he's going to be the coach for 18 years. If he doesn't really have a lot of control on stuff, I wouldn't believe that for 1 second. Does he have control for
Mhm.
everything? No. Um, but in terms of like if Arthur Smith's not really going to have a mud like a heavy influence on the rest of the offensive coaching tree, um, it could just be based off of just how they operate. We know how the way the Steelers operate. Maybe there's another team Arthur Smith went to and they would give him a little bit more freedom. But Mike Tomlin at the same time, like there's a reason why he's come out and said many times that he's got his influence and his fingerprints on the defense or he's involved in what's going on offensively. He has said things like that in the past. So maybe just for that reason, in terms of being a little bit more hands-on, not wanting to give up a certain level of control or coaching duties, maybe that's a plausible reason. Or it could just be too, maybe just because you look at, uh, yeah, it's not like that they just got this absolute home run hire or anything like that, a guy that's gonna take him to the next heights, right? Or this ascending offensive mind, offensive play caller in the league, and they want him to be comfortable as possible. So it doesn't surprise me that he's probably not really going to have a ton of say on his coaching staff. Like he'll be involved, like just in the know what's going on. But I think that's really probably a plausible reason, just terms of that control factor, still wanting your fingerprints on some certain things. Um, because Mike Tomlin has said that stuff. So that's at least kind of my takeaway on that.
For me, I think it's a big concern.
Hmm.
You have Arthur Smith, who's his game is the running game.
Hmm.
I think that a lot of that in particular comes with the offensive line and what they're going to do and how they're going to be utilized in the running game.
Yeah.
If you aren't on the same page, your running coordinator, because that's what he's going to be. He's going to be the running
Hmm.
quarterback. Obviously, he's the offensive coordinator, but his biggest fingerprints on this offense is going to be in the running game, and probably pass to the tight end and things like that.
Yeah.
But you know, I think you have to be on the same page, have the same
Hmm.
philosophy with your offensive line coach, your running backs coach, and this offensive coordinator. Now, I
Right.
think in this type of offense, I think you might want to go out and get a passing game coordinator as well, just to kind
Yeah,
of
I
you
could see
know
that
uh,
for sure.
level it out a little bit.
Yeah.
And but if they don't let him pick his guys. And I think that he also has to have a huge component to who the passing game coordinator would be, or passing assistant coaching, whether it be the quarterback coach, because Mike Sullivan is out of the building. I mean, he's
Right.
already interviewing for other jobs. I highly
Right.
doubt he's coming back.
Right.
You're going to want your passing game and your running game to complement each other. I think that was one of the biggest things that was negative about Matt Canada's offense, was it didn't build off of anything. Like, if he did the same play, like the running play, he didn't do a running play or the same formation, same play, but with a play action pass option, or they never utilized it. So whenever they showed the same stuff, it was always the same play. And defenses were able to break that up. I mean, this is NFL.
Yeah.
These are professional defenses that are going up against. So, if you're not going to build upon the offense that you have, that's what you're going to see. And so, like, I think that there's got to be more, but if they don't allow him to get his guys to build his philosophy, to build his offense, I think it's going to be doomed from the start. I think we're going to have a lot of issues.
No, I think you make some fair points there. If you really want to change the guard on the offense, all right, you bring in Arthur Smith, who's been a head coach. He's been a play caller in this league. So you're not getting some guy that was a wide receivers coach and he's an OC now, right? This is somebody who's been a legitimate head coach for 3 years. This has been somebody who's been in this league for a while, and not a guy that coached in 2009, a guy that's been coaching in today's NFL. So if you really want to change the guard, Daniel, I agree. I think those need to be key components. In terms of really what we're kind of used to, that's why I'm not surprised, like, if he's not going to have like a whole lot of say on who comes in, who gets hired, stuff like that, just given that type of process of giving the head coach that type of control and everything. But I agree. I think that, hey, you really want a fresh start in this offense. You really want to turn the page. You really want something different. He needs to be comfortable and that everybody's on the same page, right? Like, you're not getting some guy to come in to be your pass game coordinator and they have two different outlooks on how this offense needs to be. Everybody needs to be on the same page for this thing to work. And what the Steelers have had offensively and their coaching staff the last 3 years, guys weren't on the same page. Of course they weren't. You need to be able to have that fluidness. You need to be able to have that aspect in terms of whatever other spots on your coaching staff on the offense. You need to have that. And when you look at some successful NFL offenses, they have, at least for the most part, that type of identity. I think Arthur Smith's going to bring an identity to this offense, something Matt Canada did not bring. It was something different every week. You didn't know what you were going to get. You didn't know what was going to work each week. Arthur Smith is going to bring an identity. Most people know, like, if you've kind of been a little bit more in tune on what he did with Atlanta, what he liked to do with Tennessee, you know what he likes to do. So he's going to bring that. But now you need to be able to bring those other aspects, because it's not just a one-man show. You need to be able to bring those other aspects to your offense, especially if you're going to stick with Pickett, if you're going to stick with some different elements that you had last year. You need to be able to have some more dynamic qualities to your offense, rather than just running the football, rather than just trying to get your backs, especially like a Jalen Warren or somebody in open space, or a little play action to your tight end. You need to be able to get more out of your quarterback. Can he do that? I really don't know. But what Daniel said is what needs to happen. You can't just have guys that are in two different elements of what offense needs to be. If you're going to go all in and try to really implement new offense, you need to get everybody that is on the same page with that. Will they do it? I really don't know.
Yeah, and that's the other question, will they do it? The Pittsburgh Steelers have been historically, or especially under Mike Tomlin, known to have one of the smaller staffs in the NFL. Other teams have these passing game coordinators, these running game coordinators.
Yeah, there's always some different aspects that teams have. You can look across the league at some of these offenses, especially probably teams that have a little bit more quality at quarterback play. But those things are not overlooked. Those things are important aspects. It's not just who you hire at OC. You got to fill out the rest of your offensive coaching staff. That's why you look at other guys. Just look at San Francisco, for example. I know I'm not comparing where both teams are at this state, but you look at their coaching tree on offense. There's a reason why every year guys on their offense get calls to interview about different positions from other teams. There's a reason why Philadelphia's been getting that. There's a reason why a couple guys from Buffalo has been getting that, right? Like they have those guys there, and it's not just the offensive coordinator show. And the Steelers need to not just settle with a Mike Sullivan or somebody at quarterback coach. You need to be able to get somebody in there that's all in on what Arthur Smith's going to do. Is it all going to work out? I can't really sit and tell you. It's 8 more months till the season starts. But I think that if you're going to go all in like that, you need to do that. You can't be lazy. You can't just have really just coaches that ultimately don't bring a whole lot of value. That other, like, how many other organizations ultimately value probably a couple guys on the Steelers coaching staff? Probably not too many. But I think in terms of that aspect, I think most people agree. If you're really gonna implement this new type of system, scheme, whatever you want to call it on offense, you need to give Arthur Smith a little bit of a voice on, okay, I feel really comfortable with this guy working with me. I feel comfortable with this guy working with me. And you're able to sit down, and these guys are able to sit down and be together on the same page, because we all know for sure Steelers didn't have that the last 3 years.
Yeah.
They need to have that this year and going forward. If they gave him a 3-year deal, at least for the next few years.
Well,
That's what
that's
you're
the
gonna go
other
with.
thing. Yeah, and that's the other thing. I mean, with Mike Tomlin, hasn't done his extension yet. It's been
Yeah.
said that he's going to get it done. Art Rooney came out on his interview, little tour that he did, and
Yeah.
he expressed that Mike Tomlin was going to get an extension. They look forward to having him. It hasn't gotten done yet. I thought that was something that had to be done prior to the signing of the offensive coordinator. Main reason being was, I mean, Mike Tomlin said it himself in his end of year presser that it was important. Stability was important for an offensive coordinator to want to be attracted to the position. So I don't know, maybe Arthur Smith signed because there's some, I don't know, maybe he's got something going on that in a couple of years he might be the next coach. I really hope it's not true.
Yeah. Who knows? But like what if Arthur Smith actually does a pretty good job here, right? Like, what if he actually does a pretty good job? Probably a little thought process and that might change maybe for a lot of people. But here's another question,
True.
Daniel. If you look at also if the Steelers are really wanting to bring somebody in as well to work with their quarterback rather than just to be Arthur Smith's responsibility to do that, do you think that there could be some pushback out there, just knowing like some hesitation from other guys to know that like the Steelers are relying on them to develop more of Kenny and maybe they don't really want to? Do you think there'd be any pushback, any struggle in trying to get people to buy into that?
Buy into what? I'm sorry.
Like
Run that
buy
by me again.
into like if the Steelers are gonna go out of their way and conduct interviews and bring some people in to kind of see where they're at, different coaches from wherever. I'm not gonna go through names.
Right.
But that they're trying like knowing that these coaches know their current quarterback room, that they're giving Kenny the opportunity to win the quarterback job again. Do you think there'd be any struggle in trying to get different coaches to come in and buy into that aspect of working with Kenny Pickett? And
Working with the quarterbacks
yeah,
that we have.
yeah,
I don't know, man. So here's the other thing. I think that Kenny Pickett was a guy that Arthur Smith probably looked at, when
yeah,
he was out there looking at quarterbacks when they ended up drafting Desmond Ridder.
right.
So there's that aspect of it. Maybe there is some sort of connection there. And maybe, during his evaluations, he might see something, in Kenny Pickett that, in his conversations with, Mike Tomlin, maybe that's why they decided to go with him so quickly as well.
Yeah.
It's because he is the only one that maybe said some good things about Kenny Pickett. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. I had that thought. Like that was probably my main thought when they hired him is like, okay, they only like talked to like 3 guys.
Yeah.
Like, did they
Yeah.
get a little bit of struggle to like? I know that there's probably a couple others they reached out to, but
Well,
do you
they
think there was a
had
little bit of struggle there? Like
there might have
getting
been. I
guys
mean,
to be interested?
there might have been. They asked to speak with Zach Robinson, and they never did. So
Right.
I don't understand. Was it a scheduling thing? Was it not? Maybe perhaps they did talk to him and they asked him a certain question about the
Yeah.
current quarterback position, if they would be interested in what they have in the room right now, or if they would want to get somebody in the draft.
Right.
And maybe perhaps they didn't like their answer to that question, and so
Yeah, it's
those
possible.
things are possible.
Mhm.
But when it comes to like working with Kenny or whoever, uh I think that if an offensive coordinator can come in and they see that the guy has some potential, right?
Mhm.
I think that a person can look at that challenge and say, "Hey, I can go in there, turn that team and that offense around, make it from one of
Right.
the worst offenses to one of the better ones, and they'll probably get a head coaching position or opportunity again, in that situation." So I think that aspect of it probably does attract some, but again, you do need a quarterback for that situation. Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph. I mean, you know, those those names don't, shine off the board for,
Yeah.
offensive coordinators to go running into those type of situations. Even with Mason Rudolph's last performances,
Yeah.
overall, we really don't know what he is still. I
Yeah, the
think
the
that,
jur the jury's still out. I think we all appreciated what he did, coming in, giving life, really being the best guy out there. And it's not that he wasn't blowing everybody's socks off, throwing 3 touchdowns every game and things like that, but he conducted everybody looked very comfortable with him in there, more so than what they currently had. Players were a little bit more excited about it, so you can't overlook what he brought to the table, but I think, yeah, the jury still is out ultimately on him. He has a role in this league, it's just a matter of what that role is.
yeah,
Can't really 100% say.
yeah, for sure. And I mean, I think if you're a young OC though,
Mhm.
and you have opportunities now, if you don't ever have any other opportunities, obviously,
Yeah,
you're going to take the one that's there. But if
yeah,
you're a young OC like a Zach Robinson, and that you have a job somewhere else and some
uh-huh,
security with a guy that knows you, and you might like that quarterback situation better. I do see one of those type of situations where
mhm.
a potential candidate could choose to go somewhere else because of the quarterback
Yeah,
situation. And
and
like I said, with Mason,
Atlanta's probably gonna get a new quarterback, whether that's through the draft or a free agent or something like that, so that also could have been a reason that he went there, that
right,
Zach Robinson went there, just kinda what you said.
right, yeah, 100%. And when it comes, back to like Mason, like you said, the jury's still out him. He hasn't played a full season yet,
Mhm.
you know, and I think that it would be fair, if he does come back, to give him a full off season as the starting guy. He's not
Mhm.
yet had that. He's not
Yeah,
had an off season as the guy. He's not had an off season or an offense where it was tailor made for him, for his
right.
likes and dislikes. Everything that he's had to do was tailor made for either Ben Roethlisberger,
Yeah, for
Mitch
whoever else,
Trubisky,
right,
or Kenny Pickett.
right.
And getting all those reps in the off season. I mean, um, Mr. Rooney said perhaps they haven't seen a ceiling. And that might be the case in this situation. Maybe Mason
Yep,
Rudolph is better than what we've seen, given if you were to give him those reps, give him those opportunities or give him that opportunity to be the number one guy and see what he
yep,
can do and the chemistry that he can build.
right.
If he can dial in with, George Pickens and Deontay Johnson and Calvin Austin, there was some plays that he left out there where he kind of slightly threw the ball over those guys, that I think that if he had those reps and that chemistry built, that there's a good chance that those balls aren't going to be that overthrown. So,
Yeah,
um, I do think that there's an opportunity there for him, coach,
it definitely
not
is.
coach. I mean, with Rooney's statements too, he came back, doubled down, said that he wants him back, but
Mhm,
more to me, more informing were
mhm.
the were the comments about the current quarterback situation, or the current quarterback
Mm-hmm.
one, which is Kenny Pickett.
Mm-hmm.
Like I mentioned before, he talked about him coming out of the huddle and having to read defenses faster and better. That's a big statement for the owner of the team to say. He also said Mason Rudolph came in and showed what the offense is capable of with good quarterback play.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know a lot of people are saying, yeah, they said that he's going to be QB1. They're confident in him. That's
Mm-hmm.
what they're saying.
Yeah.
But those type of statements, they don't really instill confidence in him to me.
Yeah,
What do you think?
I agree. When Tomlin said that about Kenny, I know everybody was like, "Oh, well, there you go. Now you have it. He's a quarterback next year." And I'm thinking to myself, it's only January. Like, of
Yeah.
course he's going to say that. He's not going to try to diminish the guy they drafted in the first round. They don't ultimately know probably what their quarterback room is going to look like. And kind of what Daniel's touched on before, he's probably going to be the only guy contracted on the roster, because I think we all can say Mitch Trubisky's probably going to go. So I think from those standpoints, I don't think anybody should be 100% dialed in that Kenny's going to be QB1.
Mark Caboli, he was on 97.3 The Fan. He's a Steelers insider. Let's see how if you were disappointed before. He thinks it's he thinks it's going to be Kenny and Mitch 1 and 2 next year.
That's ridiculous. I don't know how anybody can come to that conclusion that Mitch is going to be on this roster next year. It's not happening. They're not going to pay this guy his salary or anything like that. And Caboli's been wrong a lot of times. I don't really buy into a lot what he tries to sell. It's the same way with Jerry Dulac. I don't. I'm blocked by Dulac for a reason, because I've called him out many times on his crap. And it's like, hey, dude, if you're going to establish yourself as an insider, not saying you can't ever be wrong or have misinformation, but if you're going to act like that you are the number one guy over some other guys that are probably just as credible as you, I'm going to call you out on it, man. If you're going to put your stamp of approval on some of the stuff that you've said over the last 2-3 years, I'm going to call you out. And I did, and I got blocked, and I didn't really care. But a few guys like that. There's a few good guys out there that cover the Steelers and stuff like that. But terms of those two, those are two of the guys that I do not take that serious at all.
Yeah. I mean, there's some guys that are out there that have some pretty hot takes. Some of the jock shock kind of guys.
Mitch is not coming back. I would bet house money on that. He is not back. They are going to cut him, and they're going to open up some salary because they're over the salary cap by a good bit.
Yeah, and I echo the same thing. I don't think he's going to be back.
No.
I think that you can probably get something better in the 7th round of the draft.
Probably could at this rate. I don't understand how he goes, and not that he was very good in Chicago anyway, but I don't know how he goes from helping them get to the playoffs for a couple years and putting up just a little bit of decent numbers to just being one of the probably worst quarterbacks I think you could ever lay your eyes on.
Yeah, it just didn't work out for him in Pittsburgh. I don't know if it was a confidence thing or something
either. I don't know either, but it's truly a mystery.
Yeah, he was worse in Pittsburgh than I thought he was in Chicago or the times that
what
he
I
filled
wanted
in
the
Buffalo.
year they signed Mitch, because they signed him in 22 and they drafted Kenny that year. I wanted them just to roll with Jameis Winston for a year and not draft a quarterback and just roll the dice and then go into the next draft and grab a quarterback. That was my ideal thing. Now, when they took Kenny, I wasn't for it. I wasn't against it. It was more so, look, they need another quarterback. I hope it works well. I hope it works out. That was kind of my whole process on it. And as we see right here, obviously it hasn't really gone that well. But that was my thing when the year they signed Mitch. That was actually probably my ideal hope that they were going to do that. Not that Jameis was anything special, but in terms of who was out there at the time, was like, why not for a year? If they stink it up, they stink it up.
For me, my hope was that they were going to give Mason Rudolph a chance. They're going to give him a shot.
Yeah.
And either he was going to show up or be average.
Yeah.
And the Steelers were going to go into the next year with a better quarterback class and have their choice.
Right.
And if Mason,
that would have been okay too. I would have been fine with that over Mitch for sure.
Oh yeah. And I was excited about it. I knew that the Steelers were going to pick somebody else up. Obviously, it couldn't have just been Mason, and I knew that they were going to get somebody in the draft. I was hoping it would have been like the 6th, 7th round in the draft this year or that year. I'm sorry, and then get another veteran that's out there that can compete with Mason and see who can win.
Yeah.
And I think that in that situation, if it was a fair match, then we'll see what happens. But I really truly didn't want a quarterback out of that draft class.
Yeah, it just wasn't. Yeah, going into it, we all knew going into that draft it was very underwhelming. It was really just a matter of how any of these guys are really going to turn out, but it was probably going to take some time. But given with Kenny, he was there. Steelers needed a quarterback. He was kind of viewed as the most polished guy. I mean, hey, you swung and you missed right now. I think you have to. It's okay to admit that. There's a lot of teams that miss quarterbacks, miss in the first round. It's just the reality. It's tough. It's hard.
And I don't get where this, stigma that he was a polished guy and NFL ready.
Yeah, that was just in terms of the narrative that he was, probably the guy that was the most ready and in terms of where he was at was most polished. I'm not saying that I thought he was, but I think just that was kind of really the narrative that he was out of all those quarterbacks that were in that class that year. He was the guy that was ready to go more than the rest.
I guess when you compare them to the rest of the class, then I guess so. Maybe, I just felt that, when you looked at his stats, that I didn't think he was a NFL quarterback ready quarterback. His time from, time to snap was snap to throw.
Yeah.
Was really bad. I think it was over 3 seconds. Yeah. He did a lot of scrambling.
Well, his scouting report too out of college is pretty accurate when you look at it.
Yeah. And I didn't see NFL ready, right then. Yeah. So, I guess when you look at the competition of that draft class, obviously there's going to be your outlier, the Brock Purdy of the world, but the rest of that quarterback class is turning out to be whatever.
It was bad, man. It was bad. Sam Howell showed some stuff. He struggled a lot too this year, but again, he was a 5th round pick.
I know that the teams got things wrong, especially like in the past, but here in the most recent recently with things like the PFF and I'm sure there's a college equivalent to PFF where there's a bunch of stats out there and all these things and you have all these cameras and eyes on the game today. I think that mistakes are probably going to be made less and less, and that the consensus of where and what these draft classes are going to be more accurate. As this game develops. I mean, you can go back to when the Pittsburgh Steelers had the 74 draft, one of the best drafts in history, if not the best draft in history. Yeah. Scouting was a lot different back then. And I can guarantee you if the scouting was what it is today, a lot of those players aren't going to make it out of the first couple of rounds, where they got the a majority of their players. And so, as technology and, the game advances and as reach gets out there, I think mistakes are going to happen less.
Yeah, no, it's definitely possible. The game's changing, analytics are changing, things like that. Sean, do you mean that Mason a whoops as in how did we miss on like spending a draft pick on him? Or do you mean a whoops as in how did we miss him maybe being a little better than the Steelers thought? Not sure what you mean there, man.
Yeah, I think what he's trying to say is if Kenny is a swing and a miss, which he may be, does that make Mason a whoops? How did we miss that? So, like, it was Mason an accident that they drafted him, and he just so happened to be what he came out, what he's shown recently?
Mhm.
And if so, how do we miss on his talent up to this point? When it comes to Mason Rudolph, I think that what I have heard and what I have seen in going to training camps and things like that is, when given the opportunity, during practices and stuff like that in training camp settings, he was able to move the ball up and down the field, but getting the ball into the end zone was still something that was an issue for him.
Mhm.
I think it was Jim Wexell who
Gotcha.
had reported at one point that that there was a situation where they had Mason doing the 2-minute drill, and he got the ball all the way down, and time expired. Like, he was
Yeah.
doing a good job, but time
Yeah.
expired, and that Tomlin just kind of looked down and said, that he just got the feeling that Tomlin was like, he is what he is. That's it. He's not going to be anything better after all this time. He's not going to be able to get the ball into the end zone,
Mhm.
which is crazy because once they put him in the stadium, it's right off the bat, it's what he was able to do. But I think that kind of buried him. I think the stigma of what people were saying who he was,
Mhm.
there was a lot of people who have deemed him a number 2 quarterback, backup
Mhm.
quarterback, no matter what. I've heard people say, we need to find out what Kenny Pickett is after 25 games, after an offseason where he was the starting quarterback. But we
Right.
know that Mason Rudolph is a QB2 when he's had half the starts and
Yeah, it's
never is.
pretty contradictional.
Yeah. So I just think that we know probably less than Mason Rudolph than we do with Kenny Pickett. And I think
I'll agree
that
with that. Yeah, I'll agree with that.
what you're thinking about Kenny Pickett as far as his performance and level now is
Yeah.
probably accurate.
Yeah.
That he's not been good. He's
Yeah.
not been good.
And this is my other thing too, with Kenny, is going back to people that say, and this isn't hatred. I actually was always for being patient with him his rookie year. I was an advocate that he should have started week 1 instead of Mitch Trubisky. And I had some expectations this year that he didn't meet, but they weren't unrealistic expectations. We don't need to go over what Kenny Pickett's done, not too much. But when people advocate that he needs a new offensive coordinator and you want to see him with a new OC, okay, I can get that. But I'd say probably the biggest thing for me is that whoever that they brought in, obviously now Arthur Smith, how much are you really going to get out of him? How much are you really going to maximize out of this guy? Because this guy is up there with some of the worst quarterbacks since the merger, statistically. So this guy, if you're on the boat of he needs a new offensive coordinator, you realize how big of a turnaround he's going to need to have. He's going to need a historic turnaround if for him to live up to being a first round pick. He's going to need to have a historical turnaround season next year. How confident are you in that?
I think that when going into the draft that Kenny Pickett was drafted in,
Mhm.
there wasn't high expectations of Kenny, and I think
Mhm.
he's not lived up to those low expectations to this point.
Yeah.
I think that's just what it is. And I think that the Steelers know ball. And when you hear, Rooney, like I said before, say Kenny needs to learn how to read defenses better, it's what happens when they break the huddle. So it's not the play call. It's not the opportunities that are there. It's just the quarterback. Quarterback play was brought up so much. The last time the Steelers brought up a position like that, they ended up drafting that position in the first round, and that was a running back position. When Najee Harris got drafted,
Mhm.
Art, I think it is Art Rooney, was talking about the running game, and the running game needed to be better, and that's what they needed to focus on, and that's what they got, running back right away. So I do think that, I'm not necessarily saying that they're going to get a quarterback in that situation, but a change was made, and I think that a change is going to be made in this situation as well. And
Mhm.
like I said, they're not going to throw him under the bus,
No, of course not. You don't want to do that.
but they had his exit meeting, and
Mhm.
they talked to him about how, that year needed to be big and the importance of that year. And he also didn't want to talk to the media. So, you can kind of connect those dots that although, Art Rooney and Mike Tomlin might be saying things publicly, whatever it was privately wasn't good enough for Kenny Pickett to want to stick around and talk about it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
I do.
We'll see how it works out. We'll see
Yeah.
what ends up happening.
Yeah.
I think that, Arthur Smith, just to kind of put a bow on everything, I think Arthur Smith is a interesting hire, to say the least. And
It is. Yeah, there's a lot of I know there's a lot of dislike reaction out there. Even more than what I've seen. I know it's out there. But I think just give the guy a shot. He did some good things with the Titans. Like I said, there's some positive outlook there. There's some concern there as well, in my opinion. That's why I'm kind of indifferent and just want to let it play out, see how they improve this offense this off season. And I think that's really all you can do until we start seeing games unfold. And then you can start to kind of get a feel for what they're trying to do and how it's working, how it's not working, the direction. So I don't know. I think that you just have to take a step back and see really how it unfolds rather than making a judgment 24 hours into the signing. Not even.
Yeah. 100%.
That's how I view it.
Let's see how it looks in preseason, but don't take too much.
Don't take too much for the preseason either, folks. We saw what happened last year.
If the quarterback comes out there with a perfect rating in preseason, you might want to be worried. I'm just gonna say,
100%, 100%.
It's kind of like that Pittsburgh Dad episode where he was talking about the Steelers versus Patriots game, and this is the one they beat the Patriots. I think this is the one where Joe Hayden intercepted the ball, and in that episode, he's talking about how the Steelers are up by 2 scores at one point. And his wife, he tells his wife, the Patriots have us just where they want us, up by 2 scores. You don't want to be up by 2 scores against the Patriots.
Right.
Like it doesn't matter. You can't do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it doesn't matter anyway. Yeah, you might as well forget it.
Right. So with that said, I appreciate you, Nathan, coming on. Let everybody know where they can find you.
Yeah, you guys can follow me at In Hindsight. I'm going to try to start doing some more lives on my own, aside from just my show with Daniel, just to try to get some stuff out. Want to transition into, I know a lot of it's been Steeler based on the season, but I like to talk about other things going on aside from them. So even if you're interested in some other talk aside from just Steeler talk, definitely going to do some shows there, especially with my buddy Zach, who's a Ravens fan. And we're going to come out with an episode where he kind of really talks about their loss and everything in between of that and probably their next steps. So just different things like that. So we all appreciate your guys' support, tuning in, putting your thoughts in the comments. Whether we agree or not, doesn't matter. We appreciate the interaction, guys, interacting with you. Daniel, another good show, a little bit of a newsworthy show. We'll see what comes out, if there's anything else interesting going into next week. But Daniel and I will be back next week on my channel.
100%, y'all. With that being said, we're out of here. Y'all have a good night, good week.
See you guys.
Peace.